Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Null. And for those of you who have not experienced any of my recent essays on how to bring reason and bring openness, bring joy and a sense of vitalism, like Thoreau was a vitalist, Montaigne was a vitalist, where they believed in, Voltaire was a vitalist, people who saw beyond limitation, people who saw a whole new purpose for living and sharing and caring and even being the outlier, people who still maintain a sense of independence of thought. And I'm seeing that now. I saw it when I was very young, and we were all kind of vitalists at that time. We believed we had purpose. The first purpose was getting your education, then having a quality relationship, then being able to find a career, something that could support you throughout your life. And we did that. It was done with honor. It was joyful. And as we went through different passages of life, our purpose continued to change and evolve. The older we got, the wiser we became in most cases. We looked around the world and we saw people whose purpose was, I'm older now, so let me help share those who are interested in mistakes they don't have to make because you learn from other people's mistakes. So you say, okay, I understand where that pothole is, I'm not going to drive into it. And we were able to get through life with some dignity. And someone would say, he had a good life, she had a good life. And almost always that also means it was joyful being around the person. The person exuded something. It's like watching Cary Grant when he was in the 1930s doing the wonderful film Philadelphia, with Katharine Hepburn and Jimmy Stewart, or Bringing Up Baby, all these wonderful screwball comedies. But they just oozed charisma. And their purpose was to take their unique gift. And who today has that charisma of Cary Grant or Katharine Hepburn? No one. I haven't seen any. And that's missing. Well, that's important. That's like eating a supposed good meal from an angry chef. Something's going to be missing, subtle. The best you can be, because when you are a chef in a restaurant, I've owned 3 gourmet restaurants. The first gourmet restaurant in America, vegan restaurant, up Fertile Earth, up at 108th and Broadway, 1970. All right, and there was a big movement towards cleaning up your diet, bigger than today. I mean, today it's totally different. I mean, what do you think when you see the President of the United States saying, "Make America healthy," and here's the man who's going to do it, and they're sitting eating a junk food, right? There's a disconnect. I'm sure you've seen it too. You say, well, why don't they get healthy? Not just fit. But back then we were willing to take on all of these dogmas and all these rituals and bring purpose to them. Honorable purpose, community togetherness purpose, cooperation, building bridges, forgiving the past, understanding its lessons. So we lived in harmony. And I'm pleased to have been a part of that. It was a transition, major transition. So today, my discussion now is on let us rediscover purpose in the age of artificial intelligence. I thought about this right up until an hour before the program. I want to reach younger people, meaning up to the age of 40, who have even unconsciously so frequently begun to detach themselves from the reality of what they want versus what they're going to get. You want more time, and yet you're going to have too much time. And what's the purpose of all that time if what you wanted more convenience. You didn't want to read anymore, you didn't want to think anymore, you didn't care about college anymore. There was no purpose in having you're committed to learning something when you could just ask a question and suddenly artificial intelligence gives the answer. The more you use it, the more addicted you become, then it becomes a matter of conditioning you to think that this is more important than anything you could do for yourself. Then they take the jobs. So you've spent all this money, you've gone to a college. And let's just assume you went with the right idea, kind of balancing the joy of socializing with people beyond your high school years in your hometown, and now opening up a new chapter, new friends, new ideas, and critical thinkers amongst them. A lot of people who think in almost an euphoric way about what could be. Okay. Well, now you're faced the idea that you're not going to have a job, not just when you get out of college, possibly forever. Well, how are you supposed to survive? Well, we've lost our sense of purpose. I said this, and someone sent this to me, and I remember saying it at a lecture recently. We cannot live fully until we understand how easily life can be taken from us by bad habits, by apathy, by depression, anxiety, by fear, insecurity, by resistance to common sense and reason, by automation, by artificial intelligence. But more important than all that is you quietly surrender your authentic purpose. So how do we get it back? And this is our journey. First, let's introduce the end of disconnection. There are moments in every age when humanity pauses, or should, and looks at its own inventions and wonders whether it has gone too far. We stand in such a moment right now. Historically, there was a term for this. It was called hedonic pleasure or hedonism. But hedonism is very good, providing that the pleasure you're obtaining does not create imbalance or evolve to decadency. So going for a walk with your loved one, holding hands, waking up in the morning and looking at someone thinking, how blessed am I to have this wonderful human being beside me? Being able to have a dog just looking in your eyes. They adore you no matter how old you are, no matter what your status of life. They're going to be with you to death. Think of the sunsets. Think of going to a place where you've not been and just absorbing all of the uniqueness of their culture and say, could I do this? Could I take this meal at this French restaurant and take it home? Could I do this? Yeah, if they did, you could. Maybe not the same standard, but you have to start by opening yourself up to what is possible. We stand in such a moment right now where people are confused, people are afraid. A lot of people should be concerned and are not. They've taken everything for granted, that nothing's going to change that would impact them. Well, Gary, I live in a gated community down in Naples or in Fort Myers or Boca or West Palm Beach. Okay. Who controls your 401k? Who controls your retirement? Who controls the price of real estate? You bought that at $1 million, but you have a golf course, swimming, boating, tennis club, pickleball, restaurants, all within that community. What happens when that community goes broke? What happens when you go broke? You've worked all that time for an opportunity to not work at a job, but to enjoy life. And now you start saying, wow, I didn't know how quickly this could dissolve. So the tools we once built to serve us are beginning to shape us in return. Artificial intelligence, automation, and a growing constellation of digital systems have woven themselves into the very fabric of modern life. For many, these changes bring a sense of progress. Gary, there's convenience, efficiency, even comfort. Yes, I would agree with that. Yet beneath the celebration lies an unease that refuses to fade. Older generations who spent decades building stability now watch the value of their savings fluctuate with algorithms that trade faster than thought. Younger generations, raised in constant connectivity, question whether life has meaning beyond the screen, beyond their so-called artificial friends that don't exist. Between them stretches a widening silence, an aching gap between experience and expectation. We are surrounded by communications, yet we struggle to connect. We are informed, yet feel less wise. The challenge of our time is not technology itself, but our surrender to it, the way it replaces reflection with reaction, patience with performance, wisdom with just data. And so the question is not whether we can keep up with machines, but whether we can remain awake within their presence. Let me just take a few moments to give you a brief history of work and meaning. For centuries, work was the vessel through which people knew themselves. After the Second World War, labor had dignity. Effort was visible, tangible, meaningful. The bridge built, the crop harvested, the classroom taught. Each act affirmed a person's worth. And mind you, I'll give you one example. When someone comes to see me because they're terminally ill, and tens of thousands have, what if I decide, I did so much work on the last person, I don't really have anything new I want to say, I'm kind of tired. The person says, but I'm on a death watch. I'm about to go into hospice care. Can't you find it within you to see if you can help me? Well, of course, my reaction is, of course I'm going to, because I'm always up for healing and help. There's no day off for that, because I can only imagine what it'd be like if someone was counting upon me and I couldn't be there for them. At the same time, when people come into my restaurant, Gary's place, for example, the first with the fertile earth. And by the way, for college students, and I just experienced this. When I was up in New York, I decided to take a friend on the Upper West Side. We just walked because I was staying at a hotel. And I wanted to see if there was any locations that I could rent and reopen a new gourmet vegan restaurant. And the answer was no. Prices have gone through the roof. But up at 108th and Broadway was the Fertile Earth, and right across the street, on the same side of the street, was a Creative Health Food Store. That health food store I opened in 1967. I had to take one whole year before I could reach $100 in sales in one day. And I remember what it was like. I could get about $20 from the garbage sanitation workers stopping off there to have their breakfast, and then lunch, and then dinner. The people that I knew when they started their career, like Hector Elizondo and Peter Boyle, and dozens of other people who would go on to, and we would talk about what you're up for, and we were just the beginning of everything. But as I got a best-selling book, and they got a off-Broadway, and then a Broadway, then a movie, but this was over years. But there I was, having to cook at night in order to take it up in the morning, and there was one bus, and only one bus, that would stop and let me put all my food on. Then I got up there, and then I had to, I built a counter so I could make food, and there'd be about 8 people come in the morning and get their breakfast. Then I'd close it down, run downstairs, and then hand bag all these dried fruits and nuts and seeds, because I had almost no money. So it was a slow process just building up my inventory. But in time, I was able to have the store full, and then I would grow stuff up. There's not a single health food store that I was aware of in America, let alone in New York State. But I would talk with other health food store owners. For example, I took, after Tom's Main Cosmetic, I remember taking him around to all the health food stores when he had a station wagon, introducing him so they'd take his products. And after the fall, and the first granola, all these first I did there. And I brought in organic produce, and it went bad. It had been harvested that morning, got it at 10 o'clock, and I had to put dry ice, and I had fresh 5 types of lettuce, some other vegetables. I had a sign, fresh organic produce. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody. As a result, it went bad until people started. And then I had a little juice bar. So I would juice with the organic. No one did that. And there's some pictures of all this up there. Little store. But it was a lot of work. Now, what's the purpose of this? Because I knew I had to see if something would work from scratch. There was no predecessor. I had to go in there. It was an old sewing machine store. I had low rent, thank goodness, because it was not a bustling neighborhood. And I had saved enough money over a 3-month period when I worked at Singer Sewing Machine. And by the way I survived at Singer and became its top store, my store was going to be closed because I was living in Wheeling, West Virginia at the time. And a guy saw me selling Cub Scout uniforms in LS Good department store in the basement one day. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm earning a little living. He said, "Do you know anything about sewing machines?" I said, "Yes." "How about old sewing machines?" I said, "Yes." "Treble, the ones you push your feet and wheel?" "Yeah." "I got a whole room and no one in my store knows how to, just 2 blocks from here, knows how to fix them." I said, "I could." So he said, "Come on up after work." I did. And over the next 4 or 5 hours, I fixed about 30 of his machines. Within 3 days, I fixed them all. So he hired me. Then about a month later, he was talking to a district manager and said they're closing down the Katanning store. Little tiny town, but it was going through a rough time. Coal mines were closing down. Steel mines were in trouble. And this was mainly town built on that. So unemployment was high. So he said, "Well, instead of closing that store, it's just a single person store, little store. Why don't you let Gary try it?" So I went up there and I couldn't get anyone to come in the store. So I spoke with a guy at the newspaper, young guy. And I said, "I'm willing to do this. Could you do a story on this? I'm only going to be here for a short period of time, but I'm willing, free of charge, to take any garment and redo the whole garment. So if you've got the proms coming up and you got an old prom dress that doesn't fit your daughter, I'll restyle it." "How do you do that?" "Well, my mom showed me how to sew because we had hand-me-downs. So I got my brother's clothes and my brother Steve got mine. And so I watched her do it and I found it fascinating. So she showed me how to do it. And then I have my own sketchbook of designs I've designed. No success in selling them, but at least I did poetry, I did sculpting, I did painting, I did all kinds of things. And then when I felt that I had done it as much as I could, then I went on something else. So anyhow, he ran the ad, people started showing up, and I had no friends. There was no social life whatsoever. I had to go to the store and buy cans of beans and garlic and stuff to take it to a restaurant. And I only made $57 a week. And I gave the guy $5. And that's almost my entire salary. So I could go in the kitchen and make my own food. And he was kind enough to let me do it. Barren little room I was in. The bathroom was down the hall. And the train went right in front of this building. And everything shook. And I was sitting on the bed one night, and I'm looking out. It's this bleak landscape. I'm thinking, wow, I'm a young guy. And where am I? And then I realized I had a choice. I could do something that hadn't been done or let the store close as it was going to and go back to Wheeling, West Virginia. I didn't want to do that. So I just said, okay, I've got to come up with something. So I called the district manager and talked to him, and I won't go through the whole thing, but for the first time in Singer Sewing Machine's history, they made it easier to buy a sewing machine. That was my idea. And so when I had another article in the paper about this and started to promote, you don't have to lay away anymore, and there's no interest on your payment, tiny little payment. And it worked. And what I started doing is I started making my own clothes. For example, right now, this shirt that I'm wearing, I picked up the fabric at the largest fabric store I'm aware of in the United States at 37th and 7th Avenue on the second floor on the east side. And there's thousands of different types of fabric. And then I have an idea of what I want to do. And then I buy the fabric, design it, and then make my clothes. In fact, at my retreats and all my lectures, the clothes I'm wearing, I make them all from scratch. And there's just fun doing it. I'm going to do a workshop one day, a webinar on just how to start making all your own clothes, saving money, buying stuff that someone else, like a woman in Bangladesh or in China, wasn't abused and overworked and underpaid, 25 cents an hour in Bangladesh. so that my clothes, when I look at the label, it's Gary Null. And it's just something you do quietly. It's just like a hobby. And every day I'm going to wear something that I make, just to give you an idea, the whole full spectrum. So in any case, it worked. And I made enough money that after 3 months that I won 3 awards. And the biggest award was a ugly little green blazer, I said. And they'd never seen this before. They called me up. Now here are all the different stores, sewing machine stores. And I'm the tiny little smallest one employee, me. And he said, well, the most sales from previous time is Gary Null. Gary, here's your reward. Here's a green, beautiful blazer. I said, well, first of all, I don't like green. Secondly, I don't wear something like that. It reminds me of golf, and I don't have anything to do with golf. That was stupid, but I just was honest. Who will buy this? $20. This got to go for $100, right? And everyone's looking at me like, what's he doing? This is a true story. And someone's kind of barely held their hand up. I said, good, it's yours. And he gave me $25. And then the second was a Timex watch. Remember those? John Cameron Swayze, keep sticking. I said, this has got to go for, what, $150? Who'll give me $50? But the big one was a boat, aluminum boat, fishing boat, and its trailer. I said, this has got to go for what, $5,000? Who'll give me $500? Now about 10 hands went up. And I then got that. There were 3 awards. I took that. And I'd never had $500 in my life. And I thanked the guy who gave me the job, but I said, I'm now going to go to New York. What? I thought you were going to stay here. No, because what you saw me do was with a lot of effort. Now that's the minimum you're going to expect from me, putting pressure on me to have to exceed that. And I said, that's the way it works in our country. I'm not going to do it. It was that $500 because I brought $12 with me on my Greyhound bus ride to New York. And then I called and asked my mom to send it up. And that's how I rented the store. And that's how I bought my first inventory, which filled a few shelves. Now, the purpose of what I'm saying is that my purpose was to show that in the absence of any friends or money or resources or anything else that the average person would start off with, today, in my generation, most of us had none of that. So making yourself disciplined and honoring higher standards. And there was meritocracy. And it lasted 57 years, that little store. And across the street, that store sold the first organic produce. In time, people began to appreciate organic. I handed out. I had to actually write articles and then print them and hand them to people about the importance of organic. They didn't know. In fact, a buddy of mine owned Fairway, David, he and 3 other guys, and I was taking stuff from my farm down to Fairway. And initially, it didn't sell. He had to throw it all away. He couldn't give it away because the idea of organic was so alien to people. So don't assume because you've arrived, everyone else is there to be with you. A lot of times, you're ahead of schedule. So there has to be patience in understanding this. And anyhow, this ties into all the people I knew who grew up baby boomers after World War II. They could see tangible, meaningful developments as they mastered whatever they were doing. Then came the machines. At first, they lifted burdens. Then they lifted purpose. What began as a way to see that we could go easier on our work, that evolved into a process that removed humanity from the equation altogether. The digital age turned work into abstraction. We typed instead of touched, clicked instead of crafted. Now artificial intelligence threatens to completely eliminate that arc of transforming even thought into code. The result is not only economic disruption, but a spiritual crisis. What becomes of human identity when intelligence itself can be simulated? Technology is not the enemy. No. It is a mirror reflecting the consciousness of its creators. When guided by compassion, it heals and liberates. When guided by greed, it enslaves. The new mayor of New York is visioning a free store for food in every borough. Okay. Did he look at what happened when Norway tried this? They had to close it down. And other Baltic states tried and all sort of failed because not known criminals, but average people were stealing. It was an honor system, and they didn't honor the system. So don't plan on something unless you understand what side of a duality of purpose you are. You're giving something to someone, you're trusting that they will use it, but what if they abuse the system? Just like sanctuary cities. For those of us who understand the body politic, especially around the world, and the consequences of our own regime changes on other countries and what it did to those people, we can understand why we need a place where people can come and show that they are in a political crisis because they're on the wrong side of their home country's ideology. That's a whole lot different than what happens when you have no regulations, you have no inspections, you have no criteria, just come on in and we'll take care of you. Because there are countries and people that come in just to exploit us, not to integrate into the fabric of what we are and make us even better than what we've been. So these are ideologists who frequently are completely removed from the reality of life. Think of it this way. Think of the people that if you took all the windows out of the stores in New York, how many people would walk by watching other people steal everything they could and say, how unfortunate we've de-evolved to that. No, you have not de-evolved to that. Those people were never evolved. They're the never-do-wells. And even though they're a minority, they can destroy quality of life for the majority. Now, what if you made it no longer a crime to steal? Well, then you'd have nothing left. Oh, and by the way, that's exactly what happened in every one of the sanctuary cities. When you decriminalize something that should be criminalized, then the very fabric of that meaningfulness, I'm going to open up a business. Well, what happens if now people come in and steal everything they want and there's no consequence? Well, how does that then serve the larger good of respecting one another? It doesn't. So we must therefore look not merely at what technology does, but what a corrupt body politic does and what it makes the rest of us who accept it. Well, what are you going to do? It's a corrupt city council, a corrupt mayor, a corrupt governor, a corrupt senator. Yeah, the whole system then becomes corrupt. Just look at how much money Nancy Pelosi and her husband made, far exceeding what is humanly possible. And they had no background or experience. Look at the money, and we're not supposed to question it. Our ancestors labored to survive. We labor now to feel real. Meaning cannot be automated. It must be cultivated, tended like a living garden, watered by attention and rooted in love. The artificial intelligence revolution has created what we call a great uncertainty. Artificial intelligence has entered nearly every corner of modern life: medicine, education, finance, communication, even the intimate spaces of emotion and desire. It diagnoses and recommends and predicts and learns. It has become a quiet companion and at times a quiet threat. Some welcome the conveniences, others sense danger in the dependence. Machines analyze faster, calculate better, and soon may anticipate our needs before we speak them. Yet wisdom does not come from speed. It comes from stillness, discernment, and heart. Qualities no algorithm possesses, nor do any of the people who program this. Economic and emotional instability follow this transformation. Older workers face replacement. Who cares? Obviously, no one. Younger ones face irrelevance. Who cares? Obviously, no one. Or we wouldn't have allowed it to become this free-flowing. Retirees watch their security swing with market whims guided by automated trading. The fear unites us that intelligence without empathy will reshape our world into its own image, unmitigated desire for power and greed. If the last century was about conquering nature, this one must be about remembering our place within it. The next frontier is not digital. No, we would have had a better conversation in the 1950s and 60s when we had deep intellectual thought and the ability in a civil manner to share our ideas. Today, the next frontier is ethical. The true revolution will not be artificial intelligence, but authentic intelligence, meaning consciousness guided by moral clarity. But then we have this generation gap, and it is the most pernicious in my lifetime, because we now have a sense of duality, entitlement or abandonment. There was a conversation I had 5 years ago, just before COVID. And it was with a gentleman who has lived in my building. I lived in one apartment for about 28 years. And each morning I would go down early to do my workout when no one else was in the gym except this one person. He was a financial advisor. He didn't invest people's money, but he guided them. And he had, I think you had to have $5 million in net earnings and savings before he would take you on. And he started talking to me each day about something we had never discussed. And he was curious. He wanted my input. He said, Gary, yesterday I had someone come and they handed me a box. In the box was a Rolex watch. And they said, I'd like for you to sell this. I paid $58,000 for it, bought it as a gift for my wife in Las Vegas about 10 years ago. He said, why are you asking me to sell this? Why don't you just go to a pawn shop or someplace, put it up on eBay? Well, I want it to be quiet. All right. He found out it was really worth about $8,000. 8, not almost 58,000. So someone had paid far more, but that's true of all jewelry. And you pay at astronomical inflated retail, but when you want to sell it, you pay at astronomically depreciated downside. And he said that was not just one, but multiple of his clients. One wanted him to sell a yacht, another one wanted to sell one of his co-ops. They're unloading. Why? They're out of cash. Why? They're earning money. Their earnings are the same or more. One guy said earns $5 million a year, but his kids are going to Ivy League colleges and they don't know how to stop spending, and they feel angry at him and show anger if he suggests being more financially responsible. For them, if he's rich, they're rich. And as a result, he says, so what you see, and I've talked with other people in my field, we're all seeing the same thing. Everyone is overspent and they have no backup. And so now they're unloading stuff and they're working harder. They're more stressed. Their whole quality of life is gone. Their purpose is gone. Now the purpose is buy stuff you don't need so you can keep a good image of being the good provider when all you're doing is enabling them. So we had this conversation. So now what is happening in New York, it used to be that you'd find working class people living in New York and all the boroughs, including Manhattan, but who were able to enjoy the greatness of the city, its culture, its people, its diversity of ideas. That's not true today. In fact, I know people that had to move way out of New York, but commute. They did the same thing in LA and San Francisco. I know. These are some of my people I work with, and they say, you can't live in San Francisco anymore. Everything's overinflated. Well, now what happens when artificial intelligence comes in and says, this is what you're going to do, and starts controlling the body politic and financing and food and everything else, and medicine. That's what it's doing right now. So each generation looks at the other generation with suspicion. The young see the old as architects of decline. The old see the young as ungrateful heirs. Both are mistaken, and both are wounded. I see it. My goodness, I see it. I don't just look at the physical condition a person is manifesting, try to help them. I look at all the other tangential, but also existential issues in their life. and you see people that are just working themselves to death without any sense of appreciation for those that they continue to be responsible for, even though they shouldn't. The young are born into systems that reward distraction and punish patience. They inherit an economy of debt and uncertainty. They reach for technology not out of vanity, but out of necessity, the only tool they have ever known. The old, meanwhile, experience a subtler loss, the erosion of the world they built, the quiet loneliness of feeling obsolete in the very civilization their labors sustain. Blame cannot bridge this divide. Anger can't, blaming others can't, but compassion can. The generations are not enemies and shouldn't be. They are fragments of our one story torn by misunderstanding. One holds memory, the other imagination. Together they form continuity, the chain of wisdom that technology alone cannot replace. But what about when technology forgets its soul? It is one thing for machines to assist human life. I agree. It is another for them to intrude upon it. Each new invention carries both promise and peril, and it is our moral responsibility to weigh both carefully. We're only being told one side of the story. Do you remember when 5G 5 years ago became the rage? Every commercial about how convenient it is. They knowingly, including the New York Times that supported this, they knowingly kept from you the 10,000 studies that showed harm, that showed increases in all these other diseases. So they were conditioning us to accept what would actually be an invisible electromagnetic pollution. So do not trust those who say, trust me. Already researchers are developing microscopic implants that can record and influence brain activity. Some are designed to restore mobility, relieve depression, and regulate chronic illness. These innovations reveal the brilliance of human ingenuity, but they also raise questions that cut to the heart of freedom. Who controls the controller? Who ensures that power remains benevolent? There is no such guidelines in effect today in any area of automation or artificial intelligence. The same technology that can help a paralyzed patient regain movement could, in the wrong hands, monitor emotions or manipulate mood. The same system that can detect disease could be turned toward surveillance or coercion. The line between healing and control is a thin line like a circuit. And if the danger is not that we will suddenly awaken in a dystopia, the danger is subtler. The gradual normalization of intrusion, the gradual intrusion into our privacy, into our thoughts. Each small convenience we accept without question moves the boundary of consent a little further. Each innovation that tracks the body's signals or predicts our thoughts in these chips, well, that is not good because then it destroys the mystery of personhood. We have seen in other arenas how secrecy and power can distort noble intentions. When science becomes entangled with politics and profit, transparency fades and the harm multiplies. The lesson is simple. Without conscious, progress becomes a peril. And I see no conscious in any of the different platforms. The task before us is not to reject technology, but to govern it wisely. We can't do that. It's not possible at this moment because everyone who has the power and the money of the hundreds of billions of dollars needed to promote what they're saying will be utopia, they're not doing this because they're moral or ethical people. To demand ethical frameworks that keep human dignity at the center of every experiment and policy, it doesn't exist. For example, just an article today showed that chimpanzees have the same emotional responses as human beings. I knew that because I used to work with the most famous chimpanzee at that time, Kokomo Jr., that was on the Dave Garroway show on NBC. I saw how its owner kept a little disc-like contraption on its back, looked like a metal frisbee. And the moment Kokomo didn't do something, boom, gets a shock. So I took it off of her. And the moment I took it off of her and opened up her cage, she came right over, got up on my lap and gave me a big hug, and she wouldn't let go. My daughter Shelley and her used to play together. Over a period of years, I wrote a major manuscript called From Instinct to Intellect, a study of primates. No one was believing that. They just thought, well, they don't feel pain. They don't have conscious awareness of anything. Oh, yeah, they do. But now think of the hundreds of millions of animals that are being tortured and killed by Anthony Fauci's deadly legacy. And all of those will continue to get your money, taxpayer money, to do research that is not needed and cause harm to these wonderful sentient creatures. So we're not even a place where we can stop, put down our fork and say, wasn't this a living creature? Yeah. Well, why don't you then say, let's do something unique. Let's prepare a good meal. You can use one of the cookbooks that are out there of, let's say, dog, cat. Oh, yeah, there are whole societies that eat dog and cat and kittens and puppies. Well, I wouldn't do that, but why would you eat an animal that someone else would say is a special creature? Having rescued over 7,500 animals and bring them back to life, the first thing I have to do is get them to trust, share love. And one day you start seeing that they're coming to you not to get food, they want to show their love. Would you eat that animal? Well, I had someone who gave me an argument. Yes, they would. I don't want that person around me. Because if that's the depth of their understanding of human life, then I can't harmonize with that. I won't harmonize my values down to those of base instinct. Remember, it's not the machines themselves that threaten us, but the absence of moral guardianship over all animals, creature, and the environment. So if you're willing to exploit the environment, you're willing to exploit animals, you're sure as hell going to be able to exploit humans. So what do we do? To live consciously in the age of artificial intelligence requires more than meditation. It requires mobilization. The preservation of human autonomy must become a matter of law as well as spirit. The right to mental and physical sovereignty. Enact binding legislation affirming that no individual should be subject to involuntary neurological or physiological manipulation. All experimental and implantable technologies must require explicit, revocable consent, transparent research and oversight, meaning established independent ethics councils open to public review that oversee neurotechnology and biotechnology, artificial intelligence development. No research that alters human biology or cognition should proceed in secrecy. And yet everything that's done today is done in secrecy. Algorithmic accountability should be part of this. Mandate that systems influencing public life, from finance to healthcare to criminal justice, undergo third-party auditing to detect bias, coercion, or harm. Ban on autonomous, coercive systems should be done right now. Outlaw the creation or deployment of machines capable of inflicting bodily harm or emotional manipulation without human judgment and oversight. And then who is going to judge? Who is pure enough in spirit or objective enough in intent to know what is right or wrong? Clearly, no one that I know of today in my life would I trust, because how you do one thing is almost always how you're going to do something else. So you look at the weakest point in a person, that is always the point that will destroy every relationship and trust and bond, but they're not going to change. People don't change. You think they do? Yeah. Counseling is going to work? Show me. Not just show me. 5 of my closest lifelong friends were psychiatrists or psychologists. And they acknowledged, we were having a long dinner once at my house, and these are top people, Harvard, Columbia, etc. They couldn't name a single person they'd ever cured because they were using the wrong protocol. But then they started exchanging. Well, I've had this person for 22 years, 3 days a week, $300 an hour, all exchanged. And I'm watching this, and I was just in disbelief. So why would you trust someone with something as important as your freedom if they have a reputation and a history of denying truth except for their own? Also, economic and educational renewal. Provide retraining and educational pathways for all workers displaced by automation, ensuring that technology enriches rather than erases livelihoods. Then I have what I call citizen participation in public literacy. Fund programs that teach citizens how artificial intelligence works, how data is used, and how to participate in policymaking. Awareness is the first defense of democracy. International cooperation. Pursue treaties that forbid weaponization of biological or neurological research and establish transparent inspection regimes. The conscience of one nation is not enough. Humanity must agree on its boundaries. These are not technical measures alone. They are moral imperatives, and we do not have people in positions of power who have any moral authority in their own lives. Look at them. They're the worst of the worst. There's a handful, but the rest are they're not people I would trust. Every safeguard we build now is a promise to the generations who will inherit what we create. So let me complete this by suggesting that amid this challenge, mastery becomes an act of moral resistance. True mastery of art, of craft, thought, or compassion is the antidote to disposability. It demands patience in an impatient age and depth in a shallow one. Technology tempts us with shortcuts, but meaning cannot be microwaved. To learn deeply, to build skillfully, to love steadfastly, these are the arts that preserve civilization. Each act of focused attention is a quiet rebellion against the culture that confuses busyness with purpose. We must teach again that slowness is not weakness, but wisdom. To know one thing well, to do one thing with care, can restore dignity in a fragmented life. Mastery reawakens the sacred bond between effort and meaning, the very bond automation threatens to dissolve. If you wish to measure the soul of a person, start with yourself. You need only ask, how do I respond this time, in this place, to these challenges? Never before have we been so busy and yet accomplished so little of lasting depth. Everything in life today is a shortcut. The human nervous system, once attuned to the rhythms of nature, now vibrates to the pulse of notifications, hyperanxiety. We live in constant alert, stimulated, overstimulated, distracted, yet seldom truly alive. The price of endless connection is the loss of true presence. To live in the moment today is to rebel against haste. It is to slow down enough to feel again, to sense the breeze, to taste the meal, to listen without agenda. It is to remember that the body itself is the most miraculous instrument we possess, requiring no update, no download, no algorithm. When we reclaim time, we reclaim meaning. And when we reclaim meaning, technology returns to its rightful place, not as master, but as servant. Begin each day in silence. Before touching a device, greet the morning with awareness. What you attend to first shapes the whole day. Simplify and slow down. Reduce noise, clutter, and unnecessary consumption. Presence thrives in simplicity. Cultivate a skill with devotion. Whether gardening, writing, or listening, let one practice anchor your awareness in excellence. Foster intergenerational mentorship. Pair the vitality of youth with the wisdom of age. Each has something the other has lost. Engage civically. Support policies that protect privacy, transparency, and ethical technology. Conscious citizenship is mindful in its actions. Honor the body. Nourish yourself with real food, movement, rest, and gratitude. The body is the vessel of consciousness. Practice gratitude and reflection daily. Gratitude is the soul's reset button, the counterbalance to the culture built on wanting more, and yet always having less. So in conclusion, building a future worth inheriting. Every generation faces its reckoning. Ours is not a war of nations, but a contest between awareness and automation. Artificial intelligence, left unguided, could become an echo of our own blindness. Guided by conscious, it could be the bridge to a wiser world. The future will not be determined by what machines can do, but what humans choose to remember. We must remember empathy. we must remember reverence. We must remember that the measure of progress is not speed, but soul. To live in the moment, then, is not escapism. It is resistance. It is the choice to remain awake in a world that profits from distraction. It is to keep faith in the mysteries of life, even as science maps its circuits. If we can do that, if we can hold conscious at the center of creation, then no technology, however powerful, will ever master us. For the true intellect of this world has never been artificial. It has always been the human heart. Those are my thoughts as a continuation of the series of essays I'm writing. And if you'd like me to pay attention and maybe write an essay based upon your needs, simply go to radio@GaryNull.com. That's radio@GaryNull.com and leave your ideas there. Continue to listen every day, Monday to Friday, noon to Eastern Time, to prn.live, prn.live. Go to the archives if you missed a show. All right? Thank you for watching, listening, and hopefully caring enough to share it with other people. Have a nice day.